us on the program, the former Emir of Kano, Muhammadu Sanusi II, has broken his silence. He's accepting his dethronement in good faith, describing it as the will of God. The former CBN governor said in a video that surfaced on the internet this morning that his removal was best for him, according to God's plan. In the video recorded in Hausa language, the former Emir of Kano said there was no reason to be sad over his removal. Instead, he urged people to appreciate and believe in God's decision.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A kullum muna cikin godiya ga Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a cikin ni'imominsa waɗanda ba sa ƙarewa. Cikin ni'imomin da Allah ya min, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ya ƙaddara an naɗa ni sarkin Kano ranar 8 ga watan Jun shekara ta 2014. Ya raya ni a cikin rayuwa da lafiya shekara kusan 6 akan wannan gado da wannan gado namu mai albarka. A yau Ubangiji subhanahu wa ta'ala wanda ya bada sarauta ya kaddara ya karba. Ko da yaushe muna faɗa cewa sarauta ajali ne da ita. Kwanakin da Allah ya rubuta akan gado ƙayyadaddu ne.
Well, before this video, the Kano state government had named the former Emir of Bichi, Aminu Ado Bayero, as the new Emir of Kano. That's after the removal of Muhammadu Sanusi II. Alhaji Ado Bayero's appointment was announced by the Secretary to the state government, Usman Alhaji, at a news conference at the State Council chambers. And it came just hours after the dethronement of the former central bank governor, whom the SSG said had consistently refused to abide by the instructions of the state government.
Shortly after the 2019 general election, Governor Abdullahi Ganduje drops a hint about reforming the state traditional institutions, and subsequently, the Kano Emir's Appointment and Deposition Act was passed into law by the State Assembly. Emir Sanusi challenged the law in court, and it was later amended to Kano Emirate Council Bill 2019, which gives the governor power to appoint and remove any emir on the ground of insubordination.
The governor, in consultation with the Emirate Council, may depose any emir in the following circumstances. 1. The deposition is required in accordance with the tradition or is necessary for the preservation of custom and tradition or peace, order, and good governance.
These and several other charges related to corruption ended the reign of Muhammadu Sanusi II as the 14th Emir of Kano. Meanwhile, a rowdy session was also recorded at the State Assembly prior to the removal of the Emir, with some lawmakers against the move, while others are in support. Less than 3 hours after the removal of Sanusi, the Emir of Bichi, Alhaji Amina Ado Bayero, one of the sons of the Sanusi's predecessor, Alhaji Ado Bayero, was appointed as the new Emir of Kano.
I have been directed by His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Kano State, Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganduje, OFR, based on the powers conferred on him to announce the appointment of Alhaji Amina Ado Bayero, the former Emir of Bichi Emirate, as the new Emir of Kano State, of Kano Emirate.
Security operatives sealed the Emir's palace and used tear gas to disperse protesters who were either in support of the Emir's removal or against it. Prior to the appointment, Alhaji Amina Ado Bayero was the Emir of Bichi, one of the 4 newly created emirates. It is expected that the new Emir will resume at the palace soon, even as Muhammadu Sanusi has been sent into exile in accordance with the tradition. Idris Jubrin, Channels Television News.
So with this royal tension coming from one of the oldest empires in Africa's history, talking about the Kano Emirate, the dethronement of Emir Sanusi is still generating heated debate. And to get a hang of this sudden political twist, we have the Executive Director of Women in Media Communication Initiative, Hajia Halima Ben-Omar, and the Commissioner of Information in Kano State, Mr. Mohammed Garba. Both of them join us live from Kano studios. Good afternoon, gentlemen and women. Thank you for joining us on the program. Let me begin with Hajia Ben-Omar. I'd like to know what kind of an emir was Malam Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi? Because for the government, he was insubordinate, he was disrespectful, someone who breached the Kano Emirate law. But was that the emir you knew?
Well, good afternoon. For me, the emir of Kano, or let me say the erstwhile emir of Kano, is someone that has a passion for the girl child. He has a passion for women. He has a passion for promoting women's rights in Islam. And he's always supportive of women issues. And that is what we have seen in him. And he is an emir that he's not only an asset to Kano State, but North, Nigeria. I can even go further to say even internationally. Now, the issue of what happened to him, I think, is something that we have seen it coming. As Muslims, we know God gives leadership to whomever he wishes and at the time he wishes. And he takes it away when he wishes at the time he wishes to take it away. So this is something that we have to be grateful to Almighty God for showing us at least no lives have been lost. And to thank Almighty Allah again that at least he was charged with insubordination, in my view. He was not charged based on the statement by the secretary to the state government as insubordination. So for me, that is something that I was really happy about because it's something that we have taken him to be very high, very eloquent, very educated,
right,
both in Islamic and Western education. He knows what he is saying, and when he speaks...
Just a moment.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about some of the things he has spoken about, you know, the girl child, education, and more. Do you think that was perhaps one of his undoing? Do you think that probably led to what we are seeing right now?
I think so, yes. One tradition that we have in the country, not just in Kano, is if a leader is outspoken, if a leader says the truth, then he becomes an enemy. And this is not just for Kano. This is a tradition in the whole country. And I think we need to begin to change the narratives. That is why we have leaders. Leaders are supposed to protect, especially political leaders are supposed to protect the electorates, you know, to face the truth. There is high level of corruption in Nigeria. And all these things are compounded. They are just making things worse because if leaders cannot come out to talk honestly, to protect, I think that's...
Hajia Ben-Omar, how do you factor in the allegations? I understand the Kano Anti-Corruption Commission is also looking into, you know, anti-corruption allegations against him. So how do you factor that in? Because that was a major discussion leading up to this one.
Well, for me, what I read is what the statement of the secretary to the state government read out yesterday, and that was the charges in subordination. For me, that's what I knew. If there are any allegations from public complaints and anti-corruption, it was not made public. Probably I've not read it anywhere in WhatsApp groups. So these are things that I think for me is by the way or by the side. If we're talking about issues of corruption, I think almost everybody in Kano, most of the leaders in Kano are being tagged as corrupt. So it's not just the emir. Let us be very honest. And so, but I think that is why...
Hajia, just a moment before we bring in Mr. Mr. Garba. When you say other leaders are being called corrupt, who are you referring to?
Well, I'm talking about most people. If we're talking about the issue of fighting corruption, it's like the president is the only one fighting corruption.
Right.
So the issue of corruption is everywhere in the country. Every governor is tagged as corrupt. state assembly members, some of them attacked as corrupt, especially at state level.
Okay.
So we have so many issues of
All right,
corruption
let me come in
leveled
here.
against our
Just a
leaders,
moment.
political leaders.
Let's bring in Mr. Garba so we can have a rounded conversation. Now, she has mentioned a couple of things, but I'd like to take it up from that issue of corruption, which she mentioned. She has said that leaders, a lot of leaders, are also corrupt, according to her. How do you respond to that first?
Well, first of all, I think one will say that at least one is happy that the former emir has really accepted his fate, as we have seen. And I think that is what should be done, despite the fact that if you analyze the speech which he made, actually, either you can say it's been moralized. And then, secondly, the issue of corruption, which you have made mention, actually, it was not part of the reasons that was advanced that was responsible for his removal. We try as much as possible. Of course, there is ongoing investigation, and I'm sure you know that the issue is before the court of law. So there was a court order that the anti-corruption agency is being restrained from further investigation. Therefore, the state government felt that that should not be part of the issue. So other issues, especially the issue of insubordination, lack of cooperation and support from the side of the former emir, especially at this material time, that the government has quite a number of policies and programs that need the attention and support of traditional institutions, the emirs, the village heads, among others, especially the issue of the free compulsory basic and secondary education on the issue of health sector, the issue of security, among others. So if you have an emir that doesn't support some of these programs, and these programs actually are key, especially looking at the Kano Emirate, you realize that if you look at the local government that comprises the Kano Emirates, they are key local governments. They are very, very serious local government. That is why you have
Mr.
the larger
Garba,
population.
Just before we go on a short break, I was trying to touch on something Hajia raised about corruption, and she believes that there's other forms of corruption, and I believe she was alluding to the state itself, that there are other, corrupt individuals in this state. That's what I also wanted you to respond to briefly, just before we go on this break and continue the conversation.
Well, she has not mentioned specific individuals that are involved in corrupt practices, actually. It was a generalized statement. So I don't know whether who she is referring to, actually. But if she is able to do that and it affects us, of course, we are bound to respond to that. But as far as the issue of investigation of the issue of cases of corruption that affects the emir, I have made mention that we are restrained by the court of law.
Right.
And we are law-abiding citizens and government, so there is no how we are going to tie that to the removal of the emir.
All right. So, Mr. Garba, there's another issue I'd like you to respond to, which is the talk about exile and banishment. A lot of people are wondering, how did that come about? What law provides for that? But that will be after the break, as well as the Department of State Security, that's the DSS, arraigns officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, on alleged electoral fraud. Details after this time out. Join us again. Welcome back to the program. Well, we'll continue with the happenings in Kano State, the dethronement of the former emir, the announcement of a new emir, and the issues surrounding that. We still have with us, joining us on the program, the Executive Director, Women in Media Communication Initiative, Hajia Halima Ben Umar, and the Commissioner of Information in Kano State, Mr. Mohammed Garba. Both join us from our Kano studios. Thank you so much for your patience. Just before I come to Mr. Garba, Ajia, just before we went on that break, we understand, the commissioner was saying that, well, there are no specifics, but we also know that rumors had it that the former emir took up the governor on issues of corruption, issues of, education. In fact, there was this event But the governor was, the emir, the former emir was speaking about, education and how the government has not been providing education, especially in the north. So seeing this before what happened right now, I'm sure you think they're related.
Actually, I don't think they are related because the governor has an agenda for education in Kano. And then the emir, the elsewise emir also have an agenda, but his own is more focused on the girl child education. And we know we have issues around the girl child education. So I think there is a misunderstanding. You know, when they say when two elephants are fighting, it's the grass that suffers. And I think this is what is happening, or what happened in Kano. So there are lots of issues from the emir, the side of the emir, and from the government side. For instance, I personally believe that the former emir talks too much, and many leaders don't want to see people that talk too much. And so I think that is one of his crimes. He talks, never minding where he is or who is there, and he talks honestly and from his heart. And we came to understand or to realize that sometimes if you're talking, you need to mind your words, you need to chew the words, you need to think before you bring it out. And this is one of our major issues in Kano and in the country. So people don't want people that tell the truth, and so we want to be sycophants. People are expecting us to be sycophants. They don't expect us to say the truth. So I think that is one of the crime. For me, in my understanding, that is the biggest crime of the emir, because he talks too much.
Mr. Garba, I want to get your take on that before we talk about that exile. Was that what the government was expecting? Someone who was a sycophant who always praised the government. Is that right?
Well, I don't think so, actually, especially with my governor, His Excellency the Governor, Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganduje. The governor is educated, he's really exposed, so he is bound to accommodate criticisms, and he has said it in quite a number of places that he welcomes objective criticisms. And if you look at the agenda, as she rightly pointed out, especially on the issue of education, there are a lot of similarities in which the emir was also advocating, including the girl child education. It was part of the pronouncement which the governor did during the inauguration, and the implementation was on. But as he said, maybe there is sort of lack of understanding, actually, because if you look at the program on education that has been rolled out, especially the issue of poverty, the issue of young boys, the Almajiris on the streets of Kano, and the pronouncement made by the governor to ensure that the street begging has been banned, among other issues that are very progressive. These are some of the things which I believe the emir, the former emir, has been advocating.
Okay,
but
Commissioner.
But as I said from the beginning,
right. Just one more thing. I mean, I wanted to take you up on that just before we went on the break. The talk about banishment. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation around that. And for some people, they're thinking, this is 2020. I mean, what law backs that? Understanding that Nigeria's constitution gives people the fundamental right to move freely without let or hindrance. So this exile, banishment, where do you place it?
Well, I think it has been part of either the tradition or it should be part of the policy, because it's not only with Muhammad Sanusi II. It happened here in Kano with the father. It happened to the former emir of Gondu, Jokolo, among others. And I believe that has been the tradition, as I said. But looking at the law, I was made to understand, I was following events and trends after the issue yesterday, and I was made to understand that the former emir of Gandu was able to challenge the issue before the court of law, and he has a ruling. So honestly, that is an issue which I don't know whether it is precisely a tradition or is part of the constitution and what have you. But I know and I believe personally that I'm one of the advocates of freedom of speech, freedom of association, and in fact,
Okay.
my sister here can bear me witness.
So
that
will the
is an
government, just
issue
on a
which I
final
think
note,
we
on a
need
final
to-
note, if I may jump in, so will the government be reversing itself on that stance, briefly?
I don't know whether it is precisely from government. That's what
Okay.
I'm trying to explain. I
All
don't
right.
know whether it is coming from government, whether the emir has the liberty to choose. But one thing that is very, very important is that you cannot have two kings in a state. So the
We'd like
emir
to thank you.
cannot be in Kano for the time being. That is
All right.
very basic.
Okay. I would like to thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed Garba. He's the Commissioner for Information in Kano State, as well as the Executive Director, Women in Media Communication Initiative, Hajia Halima Ben Omar. They both join us from our Kano studio. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Well, moving on to other stories this afternoon. The leadership of the APC, that's All Progressive Congress in Yobe State, has rejected the purported attempt to foist Bulama Waziri as the National Secretary of the party. In a press conference in Damaturu, the Yobe State capital, the APC secretary in the state, Abubakar Bakabe, says it is a right for the state to produce an acting national secretary for the party pending the next convention. He noted the purported report suggesting architect Bulama Waziri as a replacement of Governor Mai Mala Buni of Yobe State calls for a great concern. The party therefore draws the attention of the National Secretariat not to allow some forces, which they say are filled with personal and selfish agenda, to draw the party to the path of self-destruction.
It is equally disheartening that as a major stakeholder of the party, Yobe should be treated with such wanton recklessness and in flagrant abuse of the existing procedure and practice. It has become quite necessary to draw the attention of our great party not to allow some forces filled with personal and selfish agenda to draw the party to the path of self-destruction. We demand that what is due to the state should be given to the state in the interest of peace and unity.
Well, let's talk about the COVID-19 and Nigeria's economy. President Muhammadu Buhari has set up a committee to undertake a quick assessment of the impact of the coronavirus on the economy. The committee is to brief the president on its findings today or Wednesday. Well, we're definitely looking forward to that briefing. But that's the program for this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kayode Okikulu. Don't forget, you can join the conversation on all our social media platforms at Channels TV and at CTV Politics. And you can also watch this on YouTube. Our channel is at Channels Television. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.